Moon's Heart, a tale of light and shadows. The forest breathed around her. Leaves shifted in the high canopy, not from wind, but from the weight of the night itself. Orenia paused on the narrow trail, her lantern's glow catching the pale shimmer of stardust, drifting down like rain. She had always known the Lorien woods were alive. The maps she made could capture their shape, but never their heartbeat. Tonight, though, the forest felt different. Restless, watchful. She knelt beside the pool of mirrors, where the stars came to rest before dawn. But the water was wrong, still and empty. No light, no reflection. Her breath caught. The sleeping star was gone. Somewhere in the darkness, a low voice spoke her name, and when she turned, she saw him, a stranger with eyes like midnight rain, standing at the edge of the pool, holding something that glowed faintly in his hand. The stranger didn't move. His fingers curled protectively around the faint light, as though it might vanish if he loosened his grip. Orenia rose slowly, her lantern casting a trembling circle between them. "Who are you?" Her voice came out softer than she intended, almost a whisper carried by the night air. He studied her for a moment, his gaze steady, unreadable. "The forest called you, didn't it?" His voice was low, warm, like the hush of distant rain. I heard something," she admitted, her hand tightening around the strap of her satchel. "But this," she gestured to the dark pool, "it's never been empty." He stepped closer, and the glow in his hand spilled across his face. It wasn't a lantern. It was a shard of light, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. Orenia's chest tightened. "That's starlight." His lips curved, not quite a smile. "Part of it. The rest is missing." The trees around them groaned, their branches bending as if to listen. "Why is it gone?" she asked. "They began walking without deciding to." Kaelin moved ahead, and Orenia followed, her lantern swaying in rhythm with her steps. The path narrowed, roots twisting like the fingers of old hands. At one point, Kaelin slowed and glanced back. "You shouldn't trust me so easily." She smiled faintly, though her heart raced. "I don't, but I trust the forest, and it's not trying to drive me away." He gave a quiet hum. Approval or warning, she couldn't tell. The deeper they went, the stronger the shimmer in the air became. It clung to her hair, her skin, and when she breathed, it felt like she was swallowing stars. They reached a clearing lit only by the pale curve of the moon. At its center stood an ancient tree, its bark silvered, its roots curled around a stone altar. Kaelin stopped at the edge. Orenia stepped closer to the silvered tree, her breath clouding faintly in the cool air. Up close, the bark wasn't just silver. It shimmered with tiny constellations, as if a piece of the night sky had rooted itself here. Her fingers brushed the surface, and the light in Kaelin's palm pulsed in answer. The tree responded with a low, resonant hum, like the sound of a distant drumbeat beneath the earth. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. Kaylin's gaze didn't leave the altar. The heart root. It remembers every star that's ever fallen here, and everyone taken away. The word taken made her stomach twist. You mean stolen? His jaw tightened. The sleeping star didn't vanish on its own. The forest seemed to lean in around them, the air thick with unspoken warning. Aurenia felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. She wanted to ask more, but Kaylin was already moving toward the altar. He placed the shard of light onto the stone, and the clearing flooded with silver glow. Shadows recoiled, retreating into the edges of the woods. For a moment she felt safe. Then the ground trembled. From the far tree line, a figure emerged. Tall, cloaked, face hidden, but its presence was like frost sliding over her skin. The light from the altar dimmed in its shadow. You shouldn't be here. The figure's voice was sharp, cold, but not loud. Somehow it carried, as though the forest itself passed it along. Kaylin's hand drifted toward the hilt of the blade at his side. And you shouldn't be awake. The figure tilted its head, as though amused. The star belongs to me now. Leave, and perhaps the woods will let you go. Aurenia's heart pounded. She had no weapon, no magic, only her maps and the instinct to run. But something in her refused to step back. Her voice trembled, but she found the words. If you take its light, you take the forest's life. You'll kill it. The figure said nothing, but the shadows behind it rippled like ink in water. Kaylin moved closer to her, low enough for only her to hear. If you stay, you'll be part of this, and there's no turning back. She looked at the altar, the fading shard, the silvered tree that seemed to breathe with every star it had ever sheltered. I was already part of it, she whispered. The figure's hand lifted, and the shadows lunged. Kaylin was faster. The blade in his hand flared with pale light, cutting through the dark shapes like tearing through smoke. But each strike seemed to make the forest wince, branches groaning, leaves shuddering in pain. Aurenia pressed her palm to the altar, desperate for something, anything. The bark of the heart root burned under her touch, but she didn't pull away. A spark leapt from the tree into her chest, sudden, sharp, and cold as winter air. Her vision flooded with constellations, and she saw the stars fall. A hand catching it before it touched the water. Eyes, not Kaylin's, watching her from a distance even now. She gasped and stumbled back, her heart racing with the echo of the vision. Kaylin caught her arm, steadying her. His voice was softer now. You saw something. She nodded, trying to find words. It's not just the star. Someone's been waiting for it. For me. This is where the truth begins. soft hush in the voice. The figure's shadows recoiled for a moment, as if the vision inside Orenia had pushed them back. But its stance did not change. Still as winter stone. Kaelin stepped forward, blade angled low. "You don't want to do this." A slow, cold laugh spilled from beneath the hood. "I've already done it." The forest shuddered. From the ground beneath the heartroot, thin black cracks began to spread outward, the soil curling away like old paper. Light from the altar dimmed again, retreating into the shard, as though the forest was holding its breath. Almost wonder felt her own chest tighten. That vision, the falling star, the watching eyes, was still etched behind her eyelids. Whoever this cloaked figure was, they had known she would come here. She stepped between Kaelin and the stranger. "If it's me you want, then take me, but leave the star." Kaelin's voice sharpened. "Orenia." The figure's head tilted, shadows curling closer around it. "Brave or foolish?" Her fingers curled into fists, but she kept her voice steady. "Sometimes they're the same thing." The figure moved at last, one step forward, and the darkness followed like a tide. Kaelin's blade lifted in a flash of silver, but the stranger didn't attack. Instead, it dropped something onto the ground. A small silver coin. It rolled toward Orenia's feet and stopped perfectly at her boot. She bent slowly, the forest whispering around her, and picked it up. It was warm, too warm for metal, and etched with a star-shaped crack that glowed faintly. The moment her skin touched it, the world shifted. The clearing faded. The silvered tree dissolved into mist. She stood in an endless starlit plain. The ground was smooth and black, like glass reflecting the universe above. Stars hung low enough she could almost touch them, and their light hummed softly in her ears. "You've come." The voice was behind her, but when she turned, she saw no one. Only the vast night, stretching forever. "What is this?" she whispered. The place between heartbeats. She felt her breath catch. "Who are you?" "You already know." Her hands trembled. "You're the one from my vision." The starlight rippled, and for a moment she thought she saw a shape forming. A tall figure, eyes lit from within, reaching toward her. But before it could take form, the sound of rushing water filled her ears. She gasped, and the forest rushed back into being. Kaelin's hand was gripping her shoulder, his face close, eyes searching hers. "You were gone." She swallowed hard. "I saw someone. They were waiting." Kaelin's jaw set. "Then we're not alone in this." The cloaked figure was gone, only faint black residue marking where the cracks had been. The shard of starlight pulsed faintly on the altar, weaker than before. With Kaelin looked at her for a long moment. "You don't have to stay involved." Orenia shook her head. "It's too late for that." She glanced toward the deeper forest, where the shadows had fled. They have the rest of the star. We have to find it. Kaelin's lips curved into the smallest, almost reluctant smile. Then we start before the forest wakes. The journey from the heart route was nothing like their path in. The forest shifted behind them, closing old trails, opening new ones that hummed faintly with starlight. Somewhere far off, a low, resonant sound echoed, too deep to be wind. Aurenia kept her lantern close, but more than once, she felt something brush her shoulder, cold and fleeting. "Don't look back," Kaelin murmured. "Why?" she asked, voice quiet. His eyes stayed forward. "Because the forest likes to see who listens." Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had lost its meaning here. Eventually, they reached a ridge where the trees broke apart, revealing a valley bathed in silver mist. At its center stood an ancient bridge, its arches carved with constellations she had never seen before. Kaelin stopped at the ridge. "Beyond that bridge," he said, "the forest stops pretending to be kind."
Aurenia tightened her grip on the lantern. "Then let's not give it the chance." They crossed at dawn. The moment her foot touched the bridge, the mist rose higher, curling around her legs. The carvings in the stone began to glow, one by one, until the entire span shone beneath their feet. Halfway across, she heard it. A whisper, soft and melodic, almost like a lullaby. It came from the mist itself, wrapping around her like gentle fingers. "Give it back," the voice sang. "The light is ours." Her steps faltered, but Kaelin's hand caught hers. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring her against the pull. "Don't answer," he said softly. "Not here." When they reached the other side, the light in the stone died, and the bridge vanished behind them, swallowed by the mist. Ahead, the ground sloped toward a glade where pale flowers grew in spirals. In the center stood a stone pedestal, empty except for the faint outline of a star carved into its surface. "This is where the rest of it should be," Kaelin said. Aurenia stepped closer, brushing her fingers over the carving. The stone was cold and wet. She frowned. "It's been here recently." Kaelin's gaze darkened. "Then they're ahead of us." A sudden rustle made them both turn. From between the flowers, a figure emerged. Not the cloaked stranger, but a girl, no older than Aurenia. Her hair spilling in waves of pale silver. Her eyes glowed faintly like reflected moonlight. "You're too late," she said. The silver-haired girl stepped closer, her bare feet silent against the damp rock. Every movement of hers seemed too fluid, as though the forest itself carried her forward. Kaelin's blade shifted slightly in his hand. "Who are you?" The girl's gaze flicked to him briefly, before settling on Aurenia. "Names matter little here. What matters is that the light you seek is no longer yours to claim." Gently, almost pleading, Aurenia took a step forward, her voice low. "The sleeping star belongs to the forest. Without it, everything here will die." The girl tilted her head, a strange sadness in her eyes. "You think the forest lives for you? You think the stars fall for you?" She laughed softly, but there was no cruelty in it, only something weary, something old. Kaelin's stance tightened. "Where is it?" in the place where starlight drowns," she said simply. "But if you go there, you won't come back." The mist around the glade thickened. Orenya felt a cool weight press against her chest, as though unseen hands were urging her to turn away. But something in the girl's voice, that strange undercurrent of longing, made her stay rooted. "Then tell me," Orenya said softly, "why are you warning us?" The girl's silver eyes softened. "Because I once stood where you do now. I chose to follow it. And when I came back, I wasn't me anymore." Kaylin's gaze narrowed. "What took you?" The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes flicked upward, suddenly scanning the trees. "It's listening," she whispered.
The forest exhaled, and the flowers in the glade bent as though under a great weight. The girl stepped back quickly. "If you truly go, take this." She reached into her sleeve a pendant, a simple circle of silver, carved with the same star-shaped crack as the coin Orenergy carried. But this one glowed faintly blue, like moonlight trapped in water. "It will not protect you," the girl said, pressing it into Orenya's palm. "But it will remember you." Before Orenya could ask what that meant, the mist rose higher, curling around the girl's legs, and in the blink of an eye, she was gone. Kaylin looked at the pendant, then at Orenya. "Do you trust her?" "I don't know," Orenya admitted. "But I think she was telling the truth about the danger." She closed her fingers around the pendant, feeling its faint warmth. "The place where starlight drowns. Do you know it?" Kaylin hesitated, then nodded once. "The drowning pools. They're at the farthest edge of the forest, where the water runs black and the sky disappears." Their path toward the drowning pools was unlike any Orenya had walked before. The trees grew closer together, their trunks twisted into shapes that seemed almost human in the half-light. The air was colder here, and the soft shimmer of stardust above had faded to only a few drifting sparks. Once, she reached out to touch the rough bark of a tree, and swore she felt a pulse beneath her palm. "Turn back." She snatched her hand away, heart racing. Kaylin glanced over his shoulder, his tone quiet but firm. "Don't touch anything here." They stopped only when the ground began to slope sharply downward, and the sound of slow-moving water reached their ears. Orenya's lantern flickered, its warm glow shrinking as though afraid. At the base of slope, a narrow river wound through a hollow choked with mist. Its surface reflected nothing. No stars, no moon, only an endless depth of black. Kaylin's voice was barely a murmur. "The drowning pools." Orenya stepped to the water's edge. Even without touching it, she could feel the cold radiating from its surface, seeping into her bones. Somewhere far out in the darkness, a faint light moved beneath the water. Slow, deliberate. "That's it," she breathed. "That's the rest of the star." Kaylin's hand caught her arm. "It's not alone." From the far bank, the water bulged, rippling outward as something rose from its depths. At first, it seemed only a shadow, But then eyes opened within it. Hundreds of them, blinking slowly, their reflections shimmering across the water. A voice like rushing tide filled the hollow. "You've brought back what was taken, but you cannot take what is ours." The shard in Kaelin's hand flared brightly in answer, casting the thing's shape into pale light. A massive shifting form of black water and smoke, crowned with fragments of stone that glimmered faintly like broken constellations. Gently but with an undercurrent of urgency, Aurenia clutched the pendant to her chest. "If it wants the shard, maybe we can bargain." Kaelin shook his head. "You don't bargain with something that only knows hunger." The thing in the water shifted, and the faint light beneath the surface drew closer to shore. "We can't let it sink," Aurenia said, her voice trembling. Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then be ready to run." The water erupted. Cold spray blinded her as Kaelin pulled her back, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The creature's form rose higher, a towering shape of liquid darkness, its hundreds of eyes locking on the shard. Aurenia's mind raced. The pendant, the coin, the vision, all pieces of something she didn't yet understand. From deep within the black water, she heard it again, that same low voice from her dream. "Bring it home." The blackwater creature towered over them, its shifting form blotting out what little sky remained. The hundreds of eyes blinked in uneven rhythm, watching, waiting. Kaelin stepped forward, blade drawn, his stance steady despite the cold mist clinging to them. "Stay behind me." Aurenia's breath came quick, clouds forming in the frigid air. She held the pendant so tightly her knuckles ached. Every instinct screamed to run, but that voice in her head, low and steady, told her to stay. The creature's nearest eye lowered, hovering just above the waterline. It blinked once, and the surface rippled outward, carrying a faint glimmer. It was the missing light, the heart of the sleeping star, drifting just beyond reach. Kaelin's grip on the blade tightened. "It's bait." Aurenia glanced at him. "It's a chance." Before he could stop her, she stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The pendant around her neck pulsed once, and the black water recoiled, just enough for her to take another step. The creature's voice rolled over the hollow like distant thunder. "It remembers you." Her pulse quickened. "Why?" "Because you are part of it." Gently, almost trembling, Kaelin moved to her side, his tone low. "Don't listen. It's twisting you." But she couldn't look away from the light beneath the water. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Kaelin, what if it's telling the truth?" The creature stilled, the hundreds of eyes locking on her in unison. For a heartbeat, the forest was silent. No wind, no water, only the low hum of the star calling her name. Then, without warning, the surface broke. A massive wave surged toward them. Kaelin caught her arm, dragging her back as cold water slammed into the bank. The light vanished beneath the churning surface, and the creature's form rose higher, shadows curling upward like smoke from a dying fire. Aurenia stumbled, her lantern slipping from her grasp and vanishing into the black. Her pendant burned hot against her skin. Kalen hauled her upright, his eyes fierce. "We need higher ground." They scrambled up the slope, water chasing their heels like living shadow. Roots clawed at their boots, and the air grew so cold it felt like ice was forming in her lungs. At the ridge, Kalen turned, blade raised, but the creature didn't follow. It remained at the water's edge, its many eyes glowing faintly through the mist. The voice came again, softer now. "You will come back to me." Orenia shivered, not from the cold. Kalen lowered his blade slowly, watching as the creature sank beneath the water, leaving only stillness behind. They didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, Kalen broke the silence. "You felt it, didn't you? The pull." She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "It's like it knows me, like I've been here before." Kalen's expression hardened. "That's not a memory you want." "But what if it's the only way to save the forest?" she whispered. They made camp in a shallow hollow sheltered by leaning pines. Kalen kept the shard close, its faint glow a comfort in the darkness. Orenia sat apart, turning the pendant over in her hand. Every time her fingers traced the star-shaped crack, she saw flashes. Starlight falling into black water, a hand catching it, and those glowing eyes watching from the depths. When she finally looked up, Kalen was watching her. Quietly. "If you're thinking of going back there alone," he said quietly, "don't." She managed a faint smile. "I'm not that reckless." But they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Gently, almost like a lullaby, the night passed slowly. Somewhere far away, she thought she heard the sound of water moving, not rushing, but breathing. And in her dreams, the voice came again. "Bring it home." This time, she answered without meaning to. Surprised. "Where?" The voice didn't speak, but a vision unfolded in her mind. A cavern beneath the forest, lit by a single beam of moonlight. In the center, a pedestal carved from silver stone, waiting for something to be set upon it. When she woke, her hand was curled around the pendant, and it was warm. Kalen was already awake, crouched by the dying embers of their fire. He looked up when she stirred. "You saw something?" She nodded. "A place. I think it's where the star belongs." His eyes narrowed. "And where is it?" She glanced toward the deeper woods, where the mist hung thick and still. "Below us." By midday, the sky was the color of tarnished silver. The air felt heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. Orenia followed Kalen along a narrow ridge, her boots slipping on patches of damp moss. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No bird call, no rustling leaves. Even their footsteps seemed to fade faster than they should. She glanced at Kalen. "It's watching us again." He didn't ask how she knew. He just shifted his grip on the blade and kept moving. They reached the mouth of a cave by late afternoon. The entrance was half hidden behind a curtain of ivy, but the air seeping out was cold and faintly metallic. Kaelin crouched, brushing the ivy aside. This is old. Older than the village. Orenia stepped closer, peering into the shadows. The stone walls shimmered faintly, as if dusted with powdered moonlight. This is it. The place from my dream. Kaelin's eyes darkened. Dreams can lie. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The air inside the cavern wrapped around her like cool silk. Every sound, the drip of water, the brush of her sleeve, seemed amplified. And there, at the center, was the pedestal she had seen. Silver stone, etched with swirling patterns that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The pendant in her hand grew warmer. Kaelin followed slowly, his gaze darting to the shadows beyond the pedestal. "We're not alone." Orenia froze. "Where?" He didn't answer, just stepped in front of her, blade raised. From the darkness beyond the pedestal, a faint ripple of water appeared on the stone floor, as if a tide had flowed in from nowhere. Then came the voice, richer, closer than before. "Bring it to me." Her fingers tightened around the pendant. "Why?" The shadows stirred, forming the vague shape of a figure. Tall, draped in something like liquid night, with eyes that caught the faintest light and made it burn. "Because without it," the voice said, "the forest dies, and so do you." Kaelin stepped between them. "She doesn't owe you anything." The figure tilted its head. "She owes me everything. She is mine." Orenia's breath caught, not in fear, but in some strange, aching recognition. She stepped out from behind Kaelin. "If I give it to you, what happens?" The figure's eyes softened, just barely. "The forest will sleep. Safe. Dreaming until the stars call it awake again."
Kaelin's grip on the blade tightened.
"Or you'll trap it forever."
The figure moved closer, its presence heavy but not cold.
"You feel it, don't you? The pull of the tide in your blood."
Her heart pounded. Memories, or something like them, flickered through her mind. Standing where she was now centuries ago, with the same pendant in her hand, and the same figure before her. She swallowed hard. "I've been here before." The figure's faint smile was almost human.
"Yes, and you gave it to me once. Will you again?"
The air between them shimmered, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw the truth. The cavern was not stone but sky. The pedestal was a fragment of a moon, and she was not Orenia, but someone older, someone who had once made a promise beneath the stars. Kaelin's voice broke through the haze. "Don't!" Her hand trembled over the pedestal. The pendant pulsed once, twice, and stilled. She closed her fingers around it. "Not yet." The figure's eyes narrowed, but its voice was calm. "Then I will wait." It stepped back into the shadows, its form dissolving like smoke in water. The cavern grew darker, colder. Kaelin let out a breath he'd been holding. "You just made an enemy." Orenia shook her head slowly.
"No. I think I just reminded him I'm not the same as before."
They left the cavern as the first stars began to show in the pale sky. The forest seemed to exhale as they stepped back into the open air. Kaelin glanced at her. "You're not going back there alone." She smiled faintly.
Orenia didn't sleep that night. She lay beneath the faint glow of the shard Kaelin kept near the fire, listening to the wind move through the pines. and to the distant, rhythmic sound of water breathing. When morning came, she knew one thing with certainty. The pendant wasn't just a key. It was a choice. By the third day on the trail, the trees had changed. The deep emerald pines gave way to pale, skeletal trunks that rose like columns in a forgotten temple. The air smelled faintly of salt and iron, and the sky was so pale it looked like it had been washed clean. Orenia walked a few paces behind Kaelin, her mind drifting back to the figure in the cave. She could still feel the weight of his gaze, like moonlight pressing against her skin. Kaelin slowed, glancing back. "You're quiet." She gave a faint shrug. "Just thinking. Dangerous habit out here," he said, though his mouth twitched in something close to a smile. They reached a ridge overlooking the sea, but it wasn't the sea she knew. Here the water was black glass, unbroken by waves, reflecting the pale sky perfectly. If she looked long enough, it was hard to tell which way was up. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Kaelin's voice was quiet. "It's the Star Veil. No one crosses it without permission." She turned to him. "From who?" "The ones who keep the tide between worlds." That night, they camped near the edge of the Star Veil. Orenia sat awake, sketching the coastline in her journal by the flicker of firelight. Kaelin had already rolled into his blanket, though she knew one wasn't asleep. He had the stillness of someone listening for danger. The pendant at her neck grew warm again. "Come to the water." She froze, glancing at Kaelin. He didn't move. The voice came again, softer. "I can show you what you've forgotten." She rose quietly, stepping past the edge of camp. The black water stretched endlessly before her, still as polished obsidian. The moment her boots touched the shore, the surface rippled, not outwards but inwards, pulling her reflection deeper, as though it was falling. And then she saw him again. He stood upon the water as if it were solid, the folds of his dark robe trailing like smoke in a current she couldn't see. "You keep it close," he said, his gaze flicking to the pendant. "Good." She crossed her arms, masking the unease curling in her stomach. "What do you want from me?" "To remember, that is all." "Remember what?" Instead of answering, he extended his hand. Between his fingers was a single silver petal, luminous, trembling with its own light. "Take it," he murmured. She hesitated, but her hand moved on its own. The moment her skin touched the petal, the world around her shattered into light. She stood in the same place, but the water was no longer black. It burned with stars, endless and bright. The air was warm, scented with 1,000 blooming trees. And beside her was not Kaelin, they but herself, or someone who looked exactly like her, dressed in silver threads. The other her smiled, eyes shimmering. "Do you know me?" "I think I do." "We are the same. Once we made a promise to guard the star vial until the last star falls." The image is blurred. A silver crown. Kaelin's younger face. A robed figure kneeling. But you left, the other self said. You chose the human world. Now, the star vial weakens. She gasped, stumbling back into the cold night air, the black water still before her. The figure was gone. The petal was gone. Kaylin's voice cut through the dark. What did you do? She turned sharply. You were awake. I saw you walk to the shore, and I saw something. Watching you. His tone was clipped, but there was an undercurrent she couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or jealousy. She tightened her fingers around the pendant. I need to know what I promised, before I can decide anything. Kaylin Dengen's jaw worked, but he didn't argue. Then I'm not letting you out of my sight. The next morning they followed the Star Veil's edge north, toward the place Kaylin claimed the Keepers might still dwell. Orenia could feel something changing. The pendant was heavier now, almost pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Far out on the black water, faint points of silver light began to appear and move. Kaylin saw them too. We're not alone out here. The lights drew closer, resolving into shapes that glided just beneath the surface. Tall, thin, and not entirely human. Their eyes gleamed like pearls. One broke the surface, its face half shrouded by strands of silver hair. It spoke in a voice that was both male and female. Daughter of the Veil, the tide calls you home. Orenia's skin prickled. I'm not your daughter. The being tilted its head. You will be again. The being's pale hand broke the water's surface, palm up. Cross, it said. The tide will hold for you. Orenia hesitated, glancing at Kaylin. He stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. Don't. You don't know where it leads. Her fingers brushed the pendant again, and warmth spread up her arm, curling into her chest. I think I already do. Before Kaylin could stop her, she stepped forward. Her boots met the surface, and instead of sinking, the black glass rippled and steadied under her weight. The world tilted. The pale sky overhead cracked open like an eggshell, spilling galaxies into the air. The Star Veil's darkness dissolved into a vast, starlit ocean, every wave carrying the shimmer of constellations she didn't know but somehow remembered. Beside her, Kaylin followed reluctantly, his own boots finding purchase on the impossible water. If this kills us, he muttered, I'm haunting you. They walked until the shore was only a memory. Ahead, islands of pure light floated, tethered to the ocean by threads of silver mist. One drew closer, a crescent-shaped isle covered in flowering trees whose petals glowed faintly, falling into the water like slow-moving comets. At its center stood a temple, its doors taller than any cathedrals, carved from crystal that caught and fractured the starlight into 1,000 colors. Orenia's breath caught. I've been here before. A voice drifted from the temple's shadowed doorway. Yes. The robed stranger stepped forward, hood falling back to reveal hair the color of frost, and eyes like an endless winter sky. In the shifting light, his face seemed ageless, young and old in the same heartbeat. "You were our guardian once," he said, "and you loved this place enough to bind yourself to it." She swallowed. "Then why did I leave?" The man's smile was faint, tinged with something like sorrow. "Because you loved someone else more." Kaylin shifted beside her. "Who?" The man's gaze flicked to him, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. "You know," the stranger murmured. Kaylin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The temple doors opened soundlessly, and the stranger stepped back. "The truth waits inside, but once you cross, you cannot leave without choosing." "Choosing what?" "Who you are, and who you belong to." Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of starbloom flowers. Every surface shimmered faintly. Floor, pillars, the vast mural overhead depicting a night sky split by a silver river. At the center of the chamber stood a mirror as tall as the doors outside, but it did not reflect her. Instead, it showed scenes in motion, herself laughing under a silver rain, Kalon kneeling in armor beside her, the robed man placing a crown on her head. And then, the moment she walked away from the temple, leaving them behind, she stepped closer. "I remember." Kalen's hand brushed hers, grounding her. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She reached toward the glass, and the world turned inside out. She stood in a memory years before she was born into the human world. The temple was alive with voices, the sky above it a swirling dance of comets. She wore silver armor, a crown woven from starlight. Kalen was at her side, but not as he was now. His eyes glowed faintly, his skin marked with the same sigils carved into the temple's pillars. And across from them stood the robed man, younger, smiling openly. Between them lay a vow, sealed in light. "You will guard the veil," her past self had said. "And if I fall, you will take my place until the stars forget my name." The robed man's voice was steady. "I will, but I will never forget you." And Kalen had said nothing, just watched her as though he knew she was already slipping away. The vision fractured. She fell back into herself in the temple, breathless, tears slipping free. The robed man spoke quietly. "You left because the choice was impossible, but the veil will not hold without you." Kalen's voice was low. "And if she stays, she will never be human again." Orenia's heart pounded. 2 worlds, 2 lives, 1 choice. Outside, the star veil shuddered. Its perfect surface breaking for the first time in centuries split the star veil like glass under too much weight. Threads of silver light bled into the black water, curling upward like smoke, vanishing into the dark. Orenia swayed, clutching Kalen's arm. "It's breaking." "Because it knows you're hesitating." His gaze locked with hers, fierce yet unbearably gentle. "Choose, Orenia. Not for them, for yourself." She turned toward the robed man. He stood utterly still, but his eyes held storms. "If I stay, what happens to him?" A flicker of something, pity, sorrow, crossed the stranger's face. "He will return to what he was before, guardian, unbound." The words landed heavy in her chest. She remembered Kalen's smile by the rivers of starlight, the way he watched her as though she was the only map he ever needed. Kaelin stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him through the strange air. "If you want to stay, I'll understand." Her voice caught. "Don't say that." "You were theirs first," he murmured, "before you ever found me in the mortal world." She shook her head, trembling. "And yet you're the only one I've ever chosen without being told to." The temple shuddered, a low, mournful sound like the ocean grieving. The mirror blazed, spilling starlight across the floor. The robed man lifted his hand. It must be now. She took a step forward, then another. Her pendant burned hot against her skin. Kaelin reached for her, but didn't stop her. She stopped halfway, looking back at him. "If I cross this threshold, I may never see you again." Kaelin's smile was small and sharp all at once. "Then don't look back." Her heart screamed at her to stay. Her duty pulled her forward. She stepped into the light. It was not warmth that met her, but cold. 1,000 years of starlit winters pressed into her bones. Her mortal heartbeat slowed, her breath crystallizing in the air. Memories that weren't hers poured in, battles fought under frozen skies, vows sworn to dying stars, the endless vigil of the Guardian. And through it all, an echo of Kaelin's voice, fading. When the light dimmed, she stood once more in the temple, but Kaelin was gone. Only the robed man remained, and the air between them was thick with finality. "You chose," he said softly. "I chose wrong." He looked at her for a long moment, then turned toward the mirror. "The veil will hold, and so will you." But that night, when the stars returned to the pool of mirrors, one shone brighter than the rest, the shape of a man watching from the mortal shore. Kaelin's hand reached toward the reflection, though he could not cross, and Orenia, though she had no voice left, reached back. For a heartbeat, their fingers touched through the glass, and then the tide carried them apart. 3 winters had passed since the star veil was mended. The forest no longer whispered her name, yet Orenia still dreamed of silver trees and a man whose eyes held galaxies. By day, she mapped coastlines for merchants who never asked about the worn pendant she kept tucked beneath her blouse. By night, she traced invisible routes across her ceiling, searching for the one that would lead her back. One evening, while charting the shifting tides, she noticed a star on her map that hadn't been there the night before. It pulsed faintly, the same heartbeat she once felt in Kaelin's shard of light. Her quill slipped from her hand. "It's impossible," she whispered. The knock at her door came just as the candle sputtered out. She hesitated before answering, her hand hovering near the hilt of her small blade. When she opened the door, no one stood there. Only a single folded map lay on the step, the parchment old, edges scorched, ink glowing faintly in the dark. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Kaelin. Her breath caught. The map didn't show any place she knew. Instead, It charted a path through the constellations themselves, lines connecting stars into unfamiliar shapes. At the bottom, in letters almost too faint to see, was a message. When the veil sleeps, follow the North Star. I will be waiting where the sky touches the sea. The room tilted around her. She gripped the doorframe, her heart hammering. 3 winters she'd told herself it was over, that what happened in the temple had been the end. And yet, he was calling her back. She packed before dawn, tucking the glowing map safely between her journals. The journey took her through jagged cliffs where waves shattered like glass, across plains where moonlight clung to the grass like frost. The closer she followed the map, the stranger the world became. Shadows moved against the wind. Rivers ran with silver instead of water. The air hummed with the memory of a name. On the 7th night, she reached the edge of the sea. It wasn't water that met her gaze, but a sky turned upside down, stars stretching out beneath her feet, as if the world had become a reflection. And standing there, at the edge of that impossible horizon, was Kalen. He looked exactly as she remembered, except for the faint silver mark across his cheek, a scar shaped like the curve of a crescent moon. "You came," he said, his voice breaking the silence like the first drop of rain before a storm. She swallowed hard. "You left me." "I had to," he said, stepping closer. "But I never stopped finding my way back."
The stars beneath them shifted, forming a bridge of light. He held out his hand. "This time," he said, "I won't let go." Aurenia's pulse roared in her ears. The sea of stars swayed, waiting. And for the first time in 3 winters, she stepped toward him. Aurenia stepped onto the bridge of light. Each step sent ripples through the constellations, scattering sparks that drifted upward like fireflies. The air between her and Kalen was charged, not with danger, but with something even more dangerous: memory. Kalen's eyes never left hers. "It will try to pull you under," he warned. "The bridge, it tests those who cross." Tests for what? For doubt. His voice was soft, but the words landed heavy. "If you falter, the stars will return you to the place you came from. You'll forget everything." They walked together, the sea of stars stretching into eternity. Beneath their feet, constellations shifted. She saw moments from her past replayed in light. Her first night in the mortal world, the moment she found the pendant, the choice she made in the temple. Her steps faltered at that memory. Kalen's hand closed over hers instantly, firm, grounding. "Don't let it win." As they moved forward, the stars began to whisper, voices she recognized. Her mother's laughter, the robed man's cold counsel, her own voice, trembling in the temple. "I chose wrong." The whispers turned into a chorus, rising like wind through broken glass. The bridge flickered beneath her feet. She squeezed Kalen's hand tighter. "Tell me something real, something they can't turn into a lie." "I searched every shore," he said. "Every dream, every shadow that might have been you.
I would have burned the veil itself if it meant finding you again. The voices recoiled. The bridge steadied. After what felt like hours, they reached the far end, an island suspended between sky and sea. A lone tree stood in the center, its branches hung with glass orbs glowing softly from within. Kaelin exhaled. Kaelin exhaled. We made it. Orenya stepped closer to the tree, drawn to one of the orbs. Inside, she saw a moving image. Herself, but not as she was now. Younger. Standing at a cliff's edge, holding the pendant. This is thoughtful. She reached out, but the glass was warm under her fingers. Kaelin's voice, almost a whisper. Memories the veil couldn't erase. She turned to him. Then why bring me here? His jaw tightened. Because one of these isn't a memory. She searched the branches until her eyes caught on an orb that pulsed differently, faster, like a heartbeat. Inside, instead of the past, she saw the future. Herself standing in a hall of broken mirrors, the pendant shattered in her palm. Her throat tightened. What does this mean? Kaelin stepped beside her, his expression shadowed. It means someone has already rewritten the end of your story. Before she could respond, the island trembled. The orbs swayed violently, light spilling into the air like spilled water. From the edges of the island, shapes began to rise. Tall, faceless, made of fractured starlight. Kaelin moved in front of her instantly. Guardians, he hissed. She gripped his arm. I thought you were a guardian. I was, he said, drawing a blade that gleamed like midnight frost. Now I'm what they fear most, a guardian who broke the oath. The first of the faceless stepped forward, the ground beneath it splintering. Kaelin swung his blade in a clean arc, light scattering. But for every one that fell, 2 more emerged. Orenya's pendant burned hot against her chest. She realized the island wasn't protecting the orbs, it was keeping her here. Kaelin, she shouted over the rising hum. We can't fight them all. Then find the future they can't touch, he said. She ran to the pulsing orb, the one that showed her shattered pendant. Without thinking, she pressed the pendant she wore against the glass. The heat was instant, searing, bright, pulling her forward. The faceless froze mid-step. Kaelin turned toward her, eyes wide. Orenya. The island exploded into light. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in the hall from the vision. Mirrors stretched endlessly, each reflecting a version of herself. Some older, some younger, some with eyes she didn't recognize. And somewhere in the maze, Kaelin's voice calling her name. The mirrors breathed, not with air but with light, slow pulses that beat in rhythm with her own heart. Each one reflected her, yet none of them were entirely her. One Orenya wore a crown of burning feathers. Another had eyes like molten gold. Another held Kaelin's hand, smiling in a way she didn't remember ever smiling before. She stepped closer to that one, almost touching the glass, but the moment her fingers brushed it, the reflection's smile vanished. Its lips moved soundlessly, and in the next blink, the glass rippled like water.
Orenya's voice trembling. Kaelin? A sound answered, a faint knock from somewhere deep within the maze. She began walking, mirrors stretching endlessly in every direction. The floor was black marble, its sheen reflecting the stars that hung impossibly above her head. Her footsteps echoed like whispers. Another mirror caught her eye. This one showed Kalen, older, eyes lined with grief. He stood alone on the bridge of light, the constellations broken beneath him.
Not every path leads home. She spun around. A man stood there. Or perhaps something wearing the shape of a man. His robes shimmered like midnight frost, his face half hidden under a hood. "Who are you?" she demanded. He tilted his head. "The one who keeps the endings, until they are earned." Her throat tightened. "You're the one who rewrote mine." A slow smile. "Not I. The choice you haven't made yet will do that for you." He stepped aside, revealing another path, one lined with mirrors that all showed the same image. Her standing over Kalen, the pendant's shards in her palm. Her heart pounded. "I would never." "Every never is simply a path you haven't yet walked," the man said, vanishing into the shadows. The knock came again, louder this time. She followed it, turning corner after corner, until the maze opened into a wide chamber. At its center, Kalen was trapped inside a ring of mirrors, each reflecting him differently. In some he was a stranger, in others a monster, in one, gone entirely. "Orenya, don't look into them. They feed on doubt." But it was too late. She caught sight of one mirror that showed Kalen's hand in another woman's. Her chest constricted, a sting she didn't want to name. The mirror beside it showed him kneeling, bleeding, begging her to leave him. Another showed nothing at all, just darkness where he should have been. Kalen's voice, urgent. "They'll make you believe I was never real." She stepped into the ring, her pendant blazing. The mirrors hissed, a sound like wind through shattered glass. One by one, the reflections began to shatter, spilling light into the air. The closer she got to Kalen, the faster they fell, until only one remained, the one that showed her breaking the pendant. She froze. Kalen's eyes locked on hers. "Don't touch it." Her breath caught. "But if I don't?" "You'll set the ending in stone," he said. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The mirror pulsed brighter, drawing her toward it, until Kalen stepped forward and caught her hands in his. His touch was warm, grounding, real. Softly, "I don't care what they show you. I'm here, and I'm not leaving without you." The mirror cracked. The maze went dark. When the light returned, they were standing not in the hall of mirrors, but at the edge of the veil, the shimmering horizon between worlds. Beyond it, Orenya could see her homeland, the mountains, the silver rivers, the place she'd once called home. Kalen's voice was quiet. "If we cross, we can't come back." Her fingers curled around the pendant. "Then let's make sure this is the right ending." And together, they stepped forward. The veil moved like water, yet hummed like glass under strain. Each ripple glowed faintly, showing fragments of memories. Orenya as a child, tracing maps by candlelight. Kalen, before she knew his name, standing alone under a rain of falling stars. Moments they had never shared but somehow belonged to them both. Kaylin's hand tightened in hers. Once we cross, the magic changes us. You might forget the path that brought you here. Gently, almost a vow. Then remember for both of us, she whispered. The first step burned. Not on her skin, but deep inside her chest. Like something was being rewritten. The veil closed around them. Shadows and light swirling in spirals. Voices slipping in and out of hearing. Stay. Turn back. He will not follow you. She felt Kaylin falter. The voices were different for him, but they cut the same way. She reached back, catching his wrist before the current could pull him away. They stumbled through onto cold stone. The air was sharp, almost metallic, and the horizon was broken. Fragments of land suspended in the sky, connected by bridges of starlight. At the farthest point stood the one she had feared to meet, the true keeper of the endings. His robe trailed like mist, and his eyes were endless wells of memory. "You've crossed into the unwritten," he said, his voice carrying without echo. "Now you must pay for the path you want to keep." "She owes you nothing." A flicker of something amusement? Pity? Touched the keeper's face. "Everything has a cost." His hand lifted, and starlight coiled into the shape of a blade. Break the pendant and he lives. Keep it whole, and he is erased. Aurenia's heartbeat roared in her ears. Her hands shook. Every instinct screamed to protect Kaylin, but to destroy the pendant meant losing the last key to her world's magic. Kaylin's voice was quiet now. "Aurenia, look at me." She did. And in that moment, she saw more than the man before her. She saw every version of him from the mirrors, every choice, every shadow. "I'd rather be gone," he said, "than be the reason you lose everything you are." Her eyes burned, softly, breaking. "You are everything I am." The pendant glowed, heat flaring through her fingers. And then she did something the keeper did not expect. She pressed the shards into Kaylin's hands. "If you're part of my story, then so is the magic. We stay or fall together." The veil cracked. Not in defeat, but in release. Starlight flooded the bridges, knitting land to land, memory to memory. The keeper's gaze followed the light, unreadable. "So be it," he murmured, and stepped back into the void. When the light settled, they stood on a hill overlooking a world reborn. Rivers gleaming, forests breathing, skies endless and bright. Kaylin let out a slow breath, his fingers still tangled with hers. "That was your plan all along, wasn't it?" She smiled, tears catching in the sunlight. "Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't imagine the ending without you in it." And somewhere, far beyond their sight, the mirrors in the maze shattered for good, their fragments scattering into the night like 1,000 falling stars. They spent their first hours in the reborn world walking through fields that shimmered faintly in moonlight, the air scented with wild lilac and rain. Kaylin kept glancing at her, not like he was afraid she'd vanish, but as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. Aurenia traced her fingers over the petals of a flower that glowed faintly blue. "It's all different, like we stepped into a painting." He smiled faintly. That's because this place remembers what beauty feels like. But peace never came without its shadows. At night, she began hearing whispers in her dreams. Not the sharp, cutting ones from the veil, but something gentler, almost pleading. The bridges are not all mended. Find the hollow star before the cycle turns. She'd wake with Kalen's arm around her, the sound of his breathing grounding her back into the present. She never told him what she heard. On the 5th night, they reached a cliff that overlooked an ocean of clouds. Floating far below, an island glimmered faintly, as though lit from within. Kalen's jaw tightened. That's where the hollow star fell. "You've been there?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but I've seen it from the mirrors, and it's not a place you walk into and come back unchanged." The only way down was a bridge of crystal, thin as frost on glass, stretching across an impossible drop. Each step echoed faintly, as though they were walking on a bell. Halfway across, the crystal beneath her feet shimmered, and she saw flashes. Herself as a child again, lost in the forest. Kalen watching from the shadows. Kalen alone, kneeling beside a shattered mirror, bleeding from both palms. She stumbled. Kalen caught her. "Don't look down," he said. "Look at me." They reached the island just as the horizon bled into dawn. At its center stood a tree unlike any she had seen. Silver bark, leaves like shards of starfire, roots disappearing into a pool of dark water. Suspended in the branches was the hollow star, a crystal sphere, fractured yet still glowing from within. The whispers returned. One choice binds the sky. One choice breaks it forever.
Halen looked at her. "We don't have to touch it. The world's already whole enough to live in." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "But it's not the world I saw in the map. Not yet." Her fingers brushed the hollow star, and the world shattered into light. She was no longer on the island. She stood in the middle of a vast hall of mirrors again. Except these mirrors didn't show her. They showed endless versions of Kalen. In some, he was a king. In others, he was a stranger. In one, he was gone entirely. And somewhere in that endless gallery, she felt a presence watching her. The keeper's voice drifted through the hall. "You thought endings could be escaped, but endings are the roots of beginnings." She's snorting. Each reflection of Kalen moved in different ways. Some smiled, some turned away, some reached for her with desperate hands. Her pulse quickened. "What is this?" The keeper's voice was like frost and fire together. "These are all the paths your choices could shape. The hollow star bends them, or breaks them." One mirror rippled, showing Kalen with streaks of white in his hair, sitting alone in a cabin, his gaze fixed on a pendant lying on the table. Another showed him standing beside a woman who wasn't her, their hands intertwined under moonlight. She turned sharply away. "Stop it!" The keeper didn't. "You asked for truth. Truth comes with the weight of what might be lost."
Suddenly, she saw herself in one mirror. Older, her eyes dim, standing on a cliff, while the sky above her collapsed into black water. Her hands trembled. What
happens if I choose wrong?
A pause.
You will not remember choosing at all.
Kaelin's voice broke through the haze. Uranya, listen to me. It doesn't matter what they show you. I'm here. Now. That's all that's real. She turned toward him, but the Kaelin in front of her flickered, becoming younger, then older, then gone entirely. The mirrors were bleeding into reality. The hollow star hovered at the center of the hall now, its cracks widening, light spilling like water. The Keeper's final words echoed. Bind the sky and he stays. Break it, and the world becomes endless. She knew what that meant. If she bound the sky, she would have him, but the world would fade, lose its magic piece by piece. If she broke it, magic would return everywhere. But Kaelin would vanish into the cycle again. Tears burned her eyes. Kaelin reached for her hand. I won't beg, he said softly. Whatever you choose, I'll find you again. Her fingers closed around the hollow star. It burned her skin, light flooding her vision until she couldn't tell if she was standing or falling. When it cleared, she was back on the crystal bridge, dawn spilling gold across the clouds. Kaelin stood beside her. You chose me? He asked. She swallowed. Thoughtful. I chose us. And the world will have to live without a little magic. Kaelin smiled faintly, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. Then let's make our own. They crossed the bridge together, the hollow star dim now, but warm in her palm. The whispers were gone. The Keeper was gone. All that remained was the sound of waves and the quiet promise of a life built under the same sky. It had been a year since the hollow star dimmed. The world was quieter now. The skies stayed pale, and the sea sang softer songs. Orenya had learned to love this gentler magic. Mornings spent mapping the tide's moods, evenings sketching Kaelin in the golden light spilling across their porch. He was still a little restless, like a wave that couldn't forget the storm. But he stayed, and that was enough. Until the night the sky bled silver. She woke to the sound, a deep resonant hum that set the lantern glass trembling. Kaelin was already at the door, staring upward. The stars were moving, not drifting, not twinkling, moving, like schools of fish in dark water, gathering into a spiral above the horizon. Orenya's heart clenched. It's coming back! Kaelin's jaw tightened. Or it's coming for us. By dawn, the first rift had appeared, a thin seam of light splitting the sky, widening each time the wind touched it. From that seam spilled fragments, shards of starlight, like the one Kaelin had once carried. Only these burned cold blue, and wherever they fell, the earth changed. The old tree by the cliff now whispered in a language they couldn't understand. The sea had begun to glow at night, and things moved beneath the surface that had no names. They tried to pretend it was only passing magic. But by the third night, the Keeper's voice returned. Not in words, but in dreams. Aurenia. She woke with her hand gripping Kaelin's, her breath sharp. It's not over. He sat up, slowly. We ended it. She shook her head. We delayed it. And now it's tearing the sky open. By the fifth night, the spiral in the heavens had become a gate. Through it, they could see a different sky entirely. One with 3 moons, and rivers of light threading between constellations. Kaelin stared at it for a long time before speaking. That's where I came from. Aurenia froze. What? He didn't look at her. Before I found you. Before I even had this name. I've walked under that sky. Then why are they opening it now? She whispered. Because they want me back. From there, the days blurred into urgency. The rift was widening, and with it came shadows that moved like ink across water. Creatures that whispered promises if you looked too long. Villagers began leaving offerings at their doorstep, convinced Aurenia and Kaelin could speak to the other side. But the truth was far less certain. The decision came on the 11th night. Aurenia woke to find Kaelin gone, followed the trail of faint blue light to the cliff, where he stood with his hands raised toward the rift. You can't go, she said, breathless. He turned, eyes glowing faintly with that alien light. If I don't, it won't close. They need someone who belongs to them to seal it from the other side. And if you do, he smiled faintly, then I'll be a story you tell under the wrong sky. Aurenia stepped closer, cupping his face in her hands. We built this life. I don't care if the sky breaks. I care if you leave. Kaelin closed his eyes, leaning into her touch for one heartbeat. Then he whispered, "You'll find me again. You always do." The rift pulsed and light swallowed them both. When Aurenia woke, she was standing under a sky with 3 moons. The air shimmered with heat and magic. Kaelin was gone, but his voice still lingered, somewhere ahead. She began walking. She didn't know if she'd find him in days, years, or lifetimes. But her heart told her the truth the Keeper never could. Some stories don't end. They just wait for the next chapter. And so she walked toward the horizon where starlight met the sea. The horizon under the 3 moons was never still. Light spilled in silver rivers across the sand, shifting like it was alive. Orenya stood ankle deep in it, the grains moving around her toes as though listening. Somewhere far away, a bell rang, low and deep, as if struck inside the bones of the world. She followed the sound. The path wound between dunes the size of mountains, their peaks crowned with shards of glass that caught the moonlight. Sometimes she thought she saw Kalen's shadow just ahead, tall and steady, but each time she reached for him, it dissolved into the glowing dust. Orenya didn't call his name anymore. She had learned the sky listened, and sometimes it answered with voices that weren't his. On the 3rd day, she found the first village. It was carved entirely into a cliff of black stone, with lanterns hanging in nets above the houses. The people were quiet, their eyes reflecting the moons in a way that felt wrong. A boy, no older than 10, approached her. "Simply, you're from the broken sky," he said. Orenya hesitated hesitantly. "I'm looking for someone," interrupting. "He's looking for you too," the boy interrupted, thoughtful. "But the moons make liars of distance." Gently that night, she slept in the hollow of a cliff room, the walls warm as if holding on to sunlight. In her dream, Kalen stood beside a river of silver, watching it flow into the dark. "Warning, don't follow the second moon," he told her. Gravely, "It's not what it seems." She tried to step toward him, but the river widened, swallowing the ground between them. When she woke, her hands were wet with silver sand. By the 7th day, the land had changed. The dunes gave way to forests of crystal trees that chimed when the wind passed. Strange birds with eyes like stars followed her, hopping from branch to branch. At night, they sang lullabies in a language she half understood. Stories of a stolen tide and a keeper's debt. One evening, as the sky deepened, she came across an archway made of woven light. Beyond it, the air shimmered as though holding its breath. Orenya stepped through. The world on the other side was a plain of endless water, shallow enough to walk across. The moons mirrored beneath her feet. Every step sent ripples racing outward, and in each ripple she saw a memory. Her first morning with Kalen, the storm they braved, the night they closed the Hollow Star, and then a memory that hadn't happened yet. Kalen standing on a shore she didn't know, smiling at her with tears in his eyes. Her breath caught. "Where are you?" His voice came, faint but steady. "Close, but not here. You have to follow the moon that hides its face." The vision dissolved with the next ripple, leaving her alone on the mirrored plain.
The plain of mirrored water stretched on for what felt like days. Yet no sun rose, no night deepened, only the patient silver glow of the moons overhead. Orenya's footsteps became quieter, her shadow thinner, until she wasn't sure if she was entirely part of this place anymore. Then, movement. From the horizon, shapes emerged. Tall, willowy figures made of pale glass, their bodies bending with each ripple in the water. They had no faces, yet she could feel them watching. One stepped forward, its voice a chorus of distant bells. You seek the one who carries the sky in his hands. Her pulse quickened. Kaelin. The figure tilted its head, the sound of water dripping into silence. You cannot walk to him. You must unmake the distance. Before she could ask, its arm extended, long and fragile as moonlight, and pressed against her chest. The plane shattered. She stood in a room she knew, Kaelin's workshop in the Watcher's Keep. Every detail was exact. The carved shelves, the scattered charts, the scent of ink and cedar. Only he wasn't there. On the table lay a single glass vial glowing faintly. A note beside it read, "Break only when the second moon weeps." She turned, and the room melted away. Now she was standing beneath a blood-red moon, the ground beneath her feet cracked and bleeding light. The air smelled of iron and rain. Shadows moved in the fissures, whispering things she couldn't understand. Somewhere ahead, she saw him, Kaelin. But this time, when she reached for him, he didn't fade. His hand caught hers, warm and real. "You found me," he said, softly, as if afraid the words might break the moment. Orenya swallowed. "I never stopped looking." They didn't kiss. They didn't even step closer. Instead, they stood with their foreheads almost touching, the world trembling around them. Then Kaelin's eyes darkened. "This place isn't done with us." The ground split wider. Water, or something like it, began to pour upward, swallowing the red light. Creatures with too many eyes climbed out, their bodies made of shifting moonstone. Kaelin pulled her back. "If it reaches the mirrored plane, it'll swallow every path home. What do we do?" He looked at the vial in her hand, the one from his workshop. "We break it." She didn't ask how it got there. She didn't question the dream. She slammed the vial against the ground. The air screamed. Light poured out in a wave, sweeping the creatures back into the fissures, sealing them shut. The red moon cracked, and through the fracture, starlight spilled in, cold and clean. When the light faded, they were standing on the mirrored plane again. The moons were pale now, almost shy. Kaelin took her hand fully this time. "Come on, there's still one more moon to set right." Orenia smiled faintly. "And after that?" He didn't answer, but his fingers tightened, as if promising after would exist. The last moon was unlike the others.
It hung low over the horizon, enormous and silver black, its surface scarred with rivers of molten light. The air here was thin, every breath tasting faintly of frost and metal. Orenya and Kaelin stood on the bridge of stars that led toward it, a fragile path suspended over an endless abyss. Each step made the bridge hum, like distant harp strings. Kaelin's voice was quiet. When the last moon wakes, the Lorien woods will remember themselves. But if we fail... She cut him off gently. We won't. As they crossed, shadows rose from the abyss. Tall, twisting forms that shimmered like oil. They whispered her name, each syllable pulling at the edge of her thoughts. One stepped onto the bridge, its face a perfect mirror of her own. Orenya froze. The mirrored self smiled, not kindly. You can't carry the sky, it murmured. It will break you. Kaelin's grip on her arm was steady. It's a lie. Keep walking. She stepped forward. The mirror self blocked her, its hand icy on her chest, but as the silver black moon loomed larger, its reflection began to fracture. Orenya raised her hand, and instead of pushing the shadow away, she pulled it into her. The cold hit like a wave, but behind it was clarity, the knowledge of every path the moons had ever taken, every story the forest had ever told. The bridge steadied beneath her feet. When she opened her eyes, the shadow was gone. They reached the moon's surface. It wasn't solid. It was a sea of slow-moving light, each ripple reflecting an entirely different sky. Kaelin stepped in first, the glow climbing up his legs. He reached for her.
No matter what you see, don't let go.
She took his hand. The light swallowed them both. Instantly, they were back in the pool of mirrors. But now the water was overflowing, stars spilling into the forest. The Lorien woods breathed deeply, as if waking from a long, long sleep. And in that quiet, Kaelin whispered, It's done. But the sky disagreed. A streak of fire tore across it. The comet from her dreams, the one that had no name. Only this time, it was falling toward them. Orenya's voice was steady. One last thing. The comet was not just fire. It was a living thing. A serpent of molten gold and fractured starlight, twisting as it fell. Its cry shook the Lorien woods, turning the air to glass for a heartbeat. Kaelin's hand tightened on hers. That's not a comet. That's a summoner's wraith. Orenya frowned. I thought they were myths. They were, until something broke the moons. The ground beneath them split, roots tearing upward, wrapping into spirals to shield them from falling shards of light. But the wraith was fast, too fast. It struck the mirrored plane with a force that sent waves of glowing water racing outward. Each droplet that touched the forest turned into crystal, freezing branches mid-sway, birds mid-flight. Orenya's heart pounded. If it reaches the Moonwells... Kaelin's jaw was set. We end it here. He pulled from his satchel a blade made of moonglass, its surface swirling like trapped storms. She had never seen him draw it before, and the way his hands shook told her why. It takes a piece of you, he admitted, to cut something that doesn't belong to this world. Orenya stepped closer. Then it takes from both of us. The wraith reared back, its molten coils wrapping around the sky. Kaelin surged forward, slashing once, a sound like breaking ice echoing through the forest. The wraith screamed, light spilling from the wound. But it didn't fall. Instead, it turned to Orenia, and in its burning eyes she saw the moons again. All of them shattering in slow motion. She understood then. The wraith wasn't their enemy. It was their warning. The true danger was still coming. Her voice was calm when she called to Kaelin. Don't kill it. He hesitated, but lowered the blade. The wraith's molten body coiled around them both, heat pressing against their skin without burning. It dipped its head, and a single droplet of its fire fell into Orenia's palm. The world blinked. They were standing in the heart of the largest moon. Around them, rivers of light flowed into an ancient, sleeping tree whose roots spanned entire worlds. A voice, deep and endless, spoke in their minds. You have returned the paths, but the one who broke them still walks. Kaelin met her gaze. No fear this time, just certainty. Then we find them. The tree's roots pulsed beneath their feet, like a heartbeat older than time. From between two massive branches, a figure emerged, cloaked in silver threads, face hidden in shadow. Orenia felt it instantly. This was the one who had broken the moons. The voice that came from the hood was cold, precise. You weren't meant to find your way here. Kaelin stepped forward. And you weren't meant to destroy what you couldn't understand. The figure tilted their head, and the silver cloak shifted, revealing eyes like cracked mirrors. The moons weren't destroyed. They were set free. They raised a hand, and the rivers of light twisted violently, tearing branches from the tree. Roots rose like serpents, striking at Orenia and Kaelin. Orenia caught one mid-strike, the fire drop from the wraith still glowing in her palm. The light shot up the root, forcing it to recoil with a sound like metal bending. Kaelin lunged with the moonglass blade, but the cloaked figure moved too fast, their shape flickering like a broken reflection. Then Orenia remembered the shadow she had taken into herself on the bridge. It wasn't just a memory. It was a key. She closed her eyes, reached inward, and called to it. The shadow unfurled inside her, wrapping her in cold clarity. When she opened her eyes, she saw the figure for what they were. Not one person, but dozens of fractured selves, each bound together by desperation. Let go, she whispered to them. They froze. Kaelin stood ready, but didn't move. One by one, the fractured selves began to peel away, dissolving into light that sank into the roots of the ancient tree. The silver cloak fell to the ground, empty. The moons, one by one, began to rise into the sky again, whole but changed. When it was done, Aurenia and Kaelin stood alone beneath the vast tree, the forest breathing steadily once more. Kaelin sheathed the blade, his voice soft. You just ended a war no one knew was coming. She smiled faintly. We ended it. The wraith appeared once more, curling in the air above them. It dipped low, its molten gaze almost gentle, before vanishing into a trail of gold across the horizon. The moons shone brighter than she'd ever seen.
Months later, the Lorien woods were alive again. Lantern moss lit the pathways, rivers sang, and the bridges of stars had become safe to cross. Aurenia and Kaelin walked side by side, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the paths between worlds waited, and they would walk them together.
The days in Aurenia's world had grown strange since the moons returned. Their silver glow no longer fell evenly. It shimmered, bent, and sometimes seemed to follow her. At first she thought it was her imagination, but Kaelin noticed it too. They stood at the edge of the rebuilt sky bridge, the wind carrying scents of rain and crushed petals. "It's calling you," Kaelin said quietly. She frowned. "What is?" He glanced up. The third moon. Ever since it rose, it had hung lower than the others, its surface marked with deep, shifting lines. At night, Aurenia could swear she heard whispers when she looked at it too long. One evening, the whispers grew too loud to ignore. They weren't words, not exactly. More like memories pressed into her mind. A child laughing under a silver tree. A cloaked figure falling to their knees. A hand warm in hers, then gone. She woke that night with her heartbeat out of rhythm. Kaelin sitting beside her, concern in his eyes. "It's not done with you," he said. The next day, the forest air turned heavy. Birds stilled mid-flight, lantern moss dimmed. And then, from beyond the bridge, a shadow began to take shape. Vast, silent, and wrong. Kaelin drew the moonglass blade without a word. The shadow stepped forward, its form rippling like smoke. This was not the cloaked enemy they had faced before. This was something older, something that had been waiting, and it spoke in a voice like cracked stone. "You opened the way. Now you must pay the cost." Aurenia's fingers tightened around the fire drop in her pouch. "What cost?" she asked. The shadow tilted its head. "Your place. One must walk into the dark, so the light may stay." Her stomach sank. "You mean me?" It didn't answer. It didn't have to. Kaelin stepped between them. "No, she's done enough." The shadow's form shuddered, the air bending around it. "Without the exchange, the moons will fall again." And this time, they will not rise. The fire drop in her pouch burned hot, as if urging her to move forward. She took a step, but Kalen caught her wrist. His voice broke on the words. I didn't come this far to watch you disappear. Her throat tightened. If I don't, everything we've fought for will die. His grip didn't loosen. Then we find another way. The shadow began to spread, curling like ink through the sky. The ground trembled. In the distance, the roots of the great tree groaned as if in pain. Orenia closed her eyes, searching for the shadow she had once taken into herself. But instead, she found something else. Kalen's presence, steady and unyielding. She realized then that magic alone wouldn't be enough. Help me, she whispered. Kalen's hand slid into hers, and together they reached toward the fire drop. The heat grew, surrounding them in gold light, until the shadow flinched and recoiled. But it wasn't gone. Not yet.
Orenia opened her eyes to see the bridge of stars forming again. Only this time, it led straight into the third moon's surface, glowing like molten glass. The shadow's voice echoed all around them. Step forward, or watch the light die. Orenia looked at Kalen. His jaw was tight, but his eyes, they held no fear, only a fierce kind of devotion. And she knew, whatever happened next, they would face it together. They stepped onto the bridge. The bridge pulsed beneath their feet, each step sending ripples of silver light outward into the void. Above them, the third moon loomed impossibly close, its glow no longer gentle. It burned, fierce and alive. The air thinned as they walked, but the gold light from the fire drop kept their lungs steady, their hearts in rhythm. Kalen's fingers never left hers. When their boots touched the moon's surface, the world shifted. The ground was glassy, reflecting fragments of memories, hers and his, as if the moon itself was peeling them open. Orenia knelt, brushing her hand over an image in the ground. Her younger self running through the orchard, laughter trailing behind her. Another ripple, and she saw Kalen, younger, eyes wide, standing over the body of someone he had once loved. His jaw tightened, but he didn't pull her hand away from the vision. This place, Kalen murmured. It knows us. Or it's trying to, she replied softly. Ahead, a gate shimmered, made entirely of light and shadow woven together. A figure stood before it. Not the faceless enemy, not the ancient shadow from before, but a perfect reflection of her. The double smiled without warmth. Only one of us can pass. Kalen stepped forward, but the reflection raised a hand. Not you. Her. The truth hit Orenia like cold water. This wasn't just a battle. This was a test. The moon's heart demanded proof she was worthy to guard its power. She stepped closer, and the double moved in sync. Every step, every breath, mirrored perfectly. It felt like walking toward a lake and seeing her reflection step out to meet her.
You think you've earned this?
The double asked, voice like hers but sharper.
You've stumbled, hesitated, run from what you fear.
Her chest tightened. I've also fought, bled, and stayed when it mattered. The reflection's smile thinned.
Prove it.
The ground fell away beneath them, and they were standing in the orchard from her childhood. Only it was burning. The smoke clawed at her throat. She moved to douse the flames with magic, but the double blocked her path.
No spells. Only you.
Somewhere in the flames, she heard a child crying. She ran toward the sound, ignoring the heat biting into her skin. When she found the child, a younger version of herself, she knelt, wrapping her arms around her. The orchard vanished. They were back before the gate. The reflection looked softer now. It stepped aside.
You remember who you are. That is enough.
The gate of light split open, revealing the moon's heart, a vast chamber of crystal and shadow swirling in endless motion. Inside, the ancient shadow waited, larger and darker than before. This is where it ends, Kalen said quietly, drawing his blade. Orania stepped forward, fire drop in hand.
No, this is where it begins again.
The heart pulsed, and the battle began. The ancient shadow struck first. It wasn't a movement so much as a swallowing of light. The heart's glow dimmed, and for a breath, they were blind. Then came the roar, not from a throat, but from the moon itself, shaking the crystal walls. Kalen moved like water, blade carving arcs of silver fire. Orania gripped the fire drop, the words the willow woman had taught her. The crystal floor shivered, answering her call. The shadow lunged, its form shifting into clawed wings, serpentine coils and jagged teeth all at once. Kalen took the hit, sliding back but not falling. "Orania!" he shouted. "The heart! Bind it to you before it devours this place!" She closed her eyes, letting her magic pour outward. Memories surged through her. The orchard, the river, Kalen's steady hands when she was bleeding, the laughter they'd stolen on nights they thought they'd never see dawn. The shadow sensed her focus and struck toward her. Kalen blocked it, blade sinking deep into the writhing dark. Pain ripped through him, but he didn't falter. She reached the center of the chamber, a suspended shard of pure light, spinning slowly, singing in a voice she could feel in her bone. The shadow screamed, writhing, shrinking under the force of her magic. Kalen staggered toward her, his blade still glowing. Together they pressed forward, her light weaving around his steel, binding the shadow until it was nothing more than a whisper, sealed within the heart. Silence fell. The moon's surface brightened, the crystal walls now reflecting their faces, weary, scarred, but alive. Kalen. It's over. She looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. No. It's beginning.
They descended the silver bridge, the heart now a small pendant at her neck. The moons hung steady above them, no longer shifting. As they reached the shore, the willow woman was waiting. "You've brought balance," she said softly, her eyes glinting. "But remember, light fades unless tended." Orenya nodded, her fingers brushing Kalen's. "I intend to tend it. Always." The orchard bloomed again, brighter than she remembered. Children's laughter drifted between the trees. Kalen sat beneath one, sharpening his blade, though his eyes followed her whenever she passed. Sometimes at night, she'd see the pendant glow, and she'd remember the way the moon's heart had felt. Vast, endless, and alive. And always in that glow, she felt his hand in hers. Because some bonds, like some magic, are unbreakable. The orchard breathed in silver. Moonlight slid like silk over the blossoms, every petal shimmering faintly as though dusted with stars. Orenia walked slowly, her bare feet sinking into the cool grass, each step leaving a shadowed imprint that the dew kissed away. The pendant at her throat was warm, alive, as if the heart of the moon still whispered to her. Its glow illuminated her fingers when she touched it, and in that glow she could almost hear Kalen's heartbeat. He stood near the old stone wall, one hand resting on his sword's hilt, the other loosely at his side. The wind tugged at his hair, catching threads of silver in the dark. His gaze was on the horizon, but she felt, rather than saw, the moment he sensed her approach. "You should rest," she said, her voice low, carrying like a secret in the night. He turned, and the small smile that curved his lips was both tired and full of quiet joy. "Only if you do." The orchard around them seemed to still. Even the night creatures paused their chorus, as if this was a moment worth listening to. She stepped closer, closing the space between them until the scent of steel and wild herbs surrounded her. Their fingers found each other, not by accident but by instinct, and lingered there, intertwined. "I never thanked you," she whispered. Kalen's brow furrowed, his voice gentle. "For what?" "For staying, even when the world fell apart, even when I was impossible to follow." His thumb moved in slow circles over the back of her hand, grounding her. "It was never impossible, not with you." The moons had aligned above them, an ancient omen of harmony, their light spilling over the orchard like a blessing. She rested her head on his shoulder, the steady rise and fall of his breath sinking with her own. They stood like that for a long time, the silence speaking more than words ever could. Somewhere, in the quiet pulse of the pendant, she felt the truth. This was not an ending, but a beginning. When she finally looked up, Kalen's eyes held that unshakable, unspoken vow. "I will be where you are." And under the twin moons, she believed him. The orchard glowed under the silver light of the aligned moons. Every blossom shimmered like captured starlight, and tiny golden motes floated lazily in the air, catching the moon's glow. Orenya Orenya and Kaelin stood on a small hill, hand in hand. The pendant at her throat pulsed softly, spilling warm light over their faces. Kaelin lifted it gently, letting it hover in his palm. For a moment, it glowed brighter, reflecting memories of battles fought, promises made, and moments they almost lost. They gazed over the forest, the distant mountains and the gentle rivers below. The wind carried faint melodies, laughter, tears, the magic that had always been their guide. Orenya rested her head on Kaelin's shoulder. "It's more beautiful than I imagined." Kaelin pressed his forehead to hers, eyes half closed. "Because we survived it, together." The camera, imagine the scene for voice, moves upward, showing the moons above. Tiny sparks of magic drift like fireflies, swirling around them, tracing the arcs of their journey. Somewhere in the distance, a golden streak flashes, a comet, a spark of future adventures. Kaelin's hand squeezed hers gently. "No matter where we go, this light will always guide us." Orenya smiled, eyes glinting with quiet joy and hope. "And we'll follow it, together." The orchard stretched infinitely, the wind carrying soft melodies, echoing their laughter, their tears, and the warmth of shared moments. Every shadow, every shimmer of light whispered their story. The camera slowly pulls back, the orchard becoming a glowing island in a sea of silver moonlight. The golden motes drift upward, merging with the stars, carrying their love, their courage, and the magic of everything they had survived. And under the moon's gentle light, they began again. Hand in hand, hearts aligned, ready for whatever magic awaited them. The screen fades slowly, the pendant's glow lingering for one heartbeat, before dissolving into the calm, star-filled night. And as the moons watched over the quiet orchard, may your heart rest in the same gentle light. Close your eyes. Good night. May the whispers of this tale follow you into your sweetest dreams.